Welcome to module number 9, looping. So looping is a very important topic and it's something that you will do quite often in programming. So what is looping? Is when we repeat the same code over and over again. There are two types of loops in Python. There are for loops and while loops. For loops repeat the same code a set number of times, so you know beforehand how many times the loop will run. A while loop will repeat that same code as long as a particular condition remains true. So you can think about like in the real world, while a light is green, cars will go through that intersection. While there is still dust on the floor, you will still be vacuuming. So some action is going to be repeated over and over again until a particular condition is no longer true. Okay, so we're going to begin with for loops, and this is probably the most more common of the loops, and it has pretty simple syntax, but it can be confusing and look a little strange at first, especially if you're coming from a different programming language. But like most things in Python, the syntax is short, it is pretty compact, and there's not much to it. So here is an example of a for loop over here. But before you begin a for loop, you must understand what an iterable object is. So all for loops use iterable objects. So you have to have this object and it must be iterable. So what does this, confusing word mean? Iterable, it just means any object that contains elements that you can go step through one at a time. That's all iterable is. So for instance, a string is iterable because you can step through each character one at a time. Lists are iterable. So you can step through each element in a list one at a time. Ranges are iterable. Remember, ranges are just integers between two numbers. You can step through those one at a time. We have not talked about tuples, sets, and dictionaries. They are different data structures, so they're in common with lists. We will talk about them in an upcoming module, but they also have items that you can step through one at a time. Okay, so the way the syntax works is that there looks like this. So the beginning is very important. So this is how you set up your for loops. So you say for item in iterable, and then you have a colon. So this is just like the if else statements. It has to end in a colon. The for loops must begin with the keyword for, so that doesn't change. And this word can be anything. This is the loop variable. We'll talk more about this in a little bit. This iterable is the object that is iterable. So you must have this already or just define it right here. So once you have a colon over here and you press enter, you will indent this code block. So we already talked about code blocks. And this is true for any Python statement that has a colon. The next line will be indented. That will be the code block. So for each, this is really like a for each loop. So for each item in the iterable, we will we'll run this code block right here. So I said for loops will repeat a set number of times. That set number is for each item in the iterable. So however many items there are in the iterable, that's how many times this will repeat. So if you have a string, it'll just be the number of characters in that string. So if your string has 10 characters, this will get repeated 10 times. All right, so it's difficult to describe a for loop without seeing it in action. Once you see it in action, it'll be much easier to understand and learn how to use it. So just like with if statements, the other last thing I want to point out here is that control flow returns to normal after all items in the iterable have been iterated over. So if you've gone through every item in that iterable, every character in that string, or every item in that list, then the next line, assuming it's not indented anymore, that will resume normal control flow. So this is, again, looping is part of control flow. Just like if else statements, we are changing the control of the flow of our program, and we're going to repeat something instead of just going one line after the other after the other. Okay, so how do you iterate over a string? So let me create some string. We'll just say my string, and let's just give it Theodore Roosevelt. Okay, so here's a string, right? I've created a string, the name of a president of the United States. So for this loop, I'm going to go through each character one at a time, including the empty space. So that's how many iterations there will be. You can use the len function to figure out how many iterations there'll be. There are 18 characters in the string, so there will be 18 iterations. All right, so this is how it works. You start off with 4, and then you have a loop variable. This can be anything that you want. It's just like creating a new variable. So this is no different than saying like x equals 5 or something. This is just a new variable for car, and this is just short for character, in my string. So for each character in this my string, colon, I want to press enter. Now Jupyter Notebooks know that we are in a code block. So I'm going to make this a very simple loop. The code block will only have one line of code. It's just going to be a print statement. We're going to print out the character. Okay, so this is going to be executed 18 times, once for each character in the string. And let me remove this. So I'm right here. So I'm going to execute this. And what's happening here is, so this for loop says, so go through each character one at a time, assign it to this variable car, C-H-A-R, and then take that car and print it to the screen. So it's running this one 18 times. When it goes back up to the top of the loop, it moves over to the next character. Okay, so that's how that works. Where is car defined? You might be asking. Okay, so we didn't say car. We didn't say like car equals something like an empty string over here. No, you don't do that with for loops. It is automatically defined right here, and it just takes on whatever the next value is in that iterable. In our case, the next value is just another character. So we're just printing it one at a time. Okay, so the loop variable can be any name. So this is called the loop variable. It can be any name. So let me go ahead and copy this and paste it over here. I chose car. It could literally be anything else. I could make it C, and then I will say print C to the screen. So for C in my string. So this will take on the next value in that string, the next character, and it does the same thing as you see. I could have made it, just spelled it out for character in my string. So it literally does not matter. I could have named it X for X in my string. I just execute it again. It does not matter. So this is just like creating a new variable, but it's inside of the loop. And so this is the basics of a for loop. So you have to begin with for, create a new variable for the for loop, the loop variable, have the word in, space, and then this has to be an iterable, and then you have a colon, and then you have the code block. So sometimes maybe we can write it like so for loop variable in iterable, and then code block. So this is not actual runnable Python code. I'm just saying this is sort of defining what is happening. So for the loop variable that's in the iterable, then run the code block. Okay, and then the execution, the control flow returns to normal when the indentation goes back to where it started from. So I can just say over here, this statement gets run once. So I'm going to execute this, and you can see that it'll keep looping until it gets to the very last character, and then at the end, this statement gets run once, will get printed to the screen. So this is not part of the code block. This is just part of the normal control flow. Okay, so that is the introduction to for loops.